Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Wyatt, and I am CEO and founder of the Mixmaster Wyatt Academy. And this is another video in the series of videos featuring some of the Sonnox plugins. The last one was the suppressor, and we talked about de-essing in mastering. Today we're going to talk a little bit about saturation in mastering. And for those of you who are not too familiar with what saturation does, it really came from overdriving analog equipment. And I think at first people said, oh no, you distorted it. And then someone said, oh, but it sounds amazing. So it became a very common practice of engineers to overdrive gear, tube compressors, tube EQs, tape machines, consoles, anything to actually get a saturated sound. And what happens is, when a lot of these circuits get overdriven, they distort, and they distort in musical intervals that are musically spaced in terms of octaves and fifths and thirds and sevenths and so on. And so what this does is it makes the sound richer. It does make the sound louder because you're adding acoustic energy, but it isn't achieving loudness through traditional sort of compression or limiting. It's doing it by making the sound richer or thickening the sound with harmonic intervals added to the original signal. So the easiest way to do this is to take a look here at this aux input. And I have a tape oscillator here. And I have the inflator, an instance of inflator. And I also have, I'll close this one, an instance of Insight, just to see what we're doing here. And I have the sound turned off, so we don't have to actually listen to this sine wave, but it sounds like this. Some people use 1K, but I can't listen to 1K. 100 works fine. And so we're seeing that we are putting a signal through the inflator, and we're seeing this 100 hertz sine wave here. And as we add the effect here on the inflator, look at those musical intervals pop up. And those are the intervals I was talking about before. They're almost like adding extensions to a chord when you're playing piano. You could have a fundamental note, and you could start to add thirds and octaves and fifths and fourths and all kinds of extensions. And it makes, rather than have just one harmonic sound, you end up having a chord. You have a bump at 300, 500, 700, or something else, and on down. And if you get fancy, you could figure that out. So that's what this is doing, is adding these harmonics. This is the cleanest saturator really available. It's been out for quite some time now, and I never don't use it. Sorry for the double negative, but I never don't use it when I'm mastering. That is to say, I always use it. So let's go over here to the master fader, and let's just take a look at the controls. Now, this is not probably very simple to engineer and create this plugin, but it's very, very simple to use. There's an input control here where you can drive it hard, especially if you're doing sound design on individual instruments. There's an effect slider, which really, in a sense, seems to me like it functions like the drive in a decapitator or any kind of drive control on a saturator, getting you more harmonics. It could very possibly be a wet-dry mix from totally harmonically blended or saturated to sort of a wet-dry blend. But it appears to me, especially when we look at the sine wave, that it seems to function sort of like a drive knob. In any event, this is where you get the effect from the inflator. There is a clip button here which allows you to which creates more internal headroom for the plugin and allows you to overdrive it and get some very extreme saturation sounds. Typically in mastering, I leave this off. Also, there's a band split option which optimizes the inflating for 3 bands, a low, middle, and a high. It can make some interesting sounds. I tend to leave this also off. Over here, we have a curve control, and the way I experience it is it sort of makes things a little darker if you're south of 0, and a little brighter if you're north of 0. I like to control those tones with other more precise plugins, so I tend to leave this absolutely at 0. So this would be my default mastering setup, would be 0 input, 0 output, unless you needed to change it to balance your gain structure, and 0 on the curve, and no band split, no clip light. And very simply, what you do here is you just add the amount of drive or the amount of effect that you want. How much saturation do you want? Again, this is really, in my opinion, the cleanest saturation tool for mastering in a single band stage. Of course, there are multi-band saturators, and that creates a whole nother workflow. But for a very simple and beautiful, magic sounding single band saturator, this is really the finest. So we'll go to a section here, we'll loop it, and we'll just add a little bit of effect. Probably overdo it at first and then back it off to a more responsible place, tasteful place. So there you see, it's just the magic, beautiful pixie dust to sprinkle over your mix. It makes things better. It's the Better Maker plugin, and it's incredibly simple to use. Sometimes at first you may want to have your effect be up in the 70s because it sounds so good. Typically, it lives between 20 and 40 on most of my masters. I like to make it subtle, but you always miss it when it's out, and you're always happy when it's in. So there you go. A very sophisticated plugin that can be used very, very simply. You can use it for saturation on individual elements, but it really is an absolutely pristine, clear, and exciting sounding single band saturator, Oxford Inflator.